Hi everyone. So I'm probably going to talk about one of the oldest startup companies today. It was a company I founded back in California in 1996, a company that unfortunately no longer exists. And I'll share some of my experiences during that roller coaster ride in the late 90s. Before we get into what the company was, if you kind of cast your mind back to the early 90s, for those of you old enough, the internet was still a little bit of a research oddity and was just starting to kind of break out into as a mainstream consumer platform. So you think about some of the really clunky old command line tools like Gopher and Archie that we used to use to kind of navigate the World Wide Web. They were essentially being supplanted by interactive web browsers like Mosaic. And that was all happening in the early 90s. I used to work at a company called Schlumberger. It was multinational, and I worked in their San Jose, California operation. And I found myself starting around mid-90s, 1995, I started writing a lot of little Perl scripts to help keep track of information on the web. So for example, I had a stock portfolio. I wanted to keep track of my stock prices. And I also wanted to keep track, or I had some colleagues in the marketing group that wanted to keep track of competitors' websites. So I wrote some Perl scripts to just basically scrape these web pages and keep track of that. So I was writing all these little scripts, and I'm a software engineer, so I wasn't really thinking about a product. I was just thinking about a problem that I experienced and that my colleagues and friends experienced. But one of the guys I worked with at Schlumberger was a product manager, Matt. And Matt had actually a really great insight. He said, look, what you're doing is great, Alan, but it can be generalized. We can do this idea of checking for change and notifying people, so change detection, notification. We can do this as a service. Now, we didn't call it as a service back then, and he'd actually started prototyping a system that did just that, except Matt wasn't the greatest software engineer, and his software was, we'll just say it's a little bit dodgy. But after many very surreptitious breakfast meetings at the office, we decided we were going to basically build this service. Matt knew a buddy who worked for National Semiconductor up the road, who was a marketing guy. Now, I say marketing loosely because his name was Mark. Mark was also an engineer who'd become a marketing person. Matt was an engineer who'd become a product manager, and I was an engineer who was still an engineer. So you're talking about 3 engineers starting a company. Not a whole lot of team diversity there, but we weren't really thinking about that at the time. Anyway, we decided to kind of build out this prototype. I decided it was going too slowly, so I took unpaid leave in early 1996. For a few months. My boss was very, very suspicious, but I'd been at that company for a while, and I think he kind of knew the gig was up, so he was quite understanding of me. And I worked basically day and night building this service. We actually incorporated the business in February '96, even though none of us had quit our day jobs yet. So we were a little bit timid about taking that final plunge. But we thought, well, we'll see what we can do, we'll see what we can do, burning the midnight oil. So what we offered, very simply, was a free service that would go out and check web pages for you and then notify you via email when we detected changes that we thought you were interested in, which we called change detection notification. And we called the product Mind It, because it would go mind information for you. And we had a really, really cute tagline, first you find it, then you mind it. Now, don't ask me to sing or play the piano. But again, for those of you who are old enough to remember just how crappy search engines were back in '96, I mean, you've got to go back to Pre-Google, of course. Google didn't come into existence until 1998. So we're talking Alta Vista, Excite, Lycos. So these search engines worked up to a point, but we identified this problem of, well, there's a lot of new information surfacing on the internet every week. I mean, every day, the internet was just exploding and still is exploding. How do you keep track of that? So we built this thing, and I have to say, and it's at the risk of sounding horribly immodest, I think it's fair to say we pioneered this notion of change detection and notification. And if you look at how many companies copied us over the next couple of years, it was quite a handful. So we called our company Netmind. That was 1996. Between 97, 2000, 2004, there were another 4 or 5 companies all doing essentially the same thing or trying to do the same thing. Up until 2004, Google Alerts finally came out. So there was clearly a demand for this idea of keeping track of information and notifying you. Anyway, so we built this product. Great technology, if I do say so myself. But we had no idea about the business. We really didn't know how we were going to make money. But we managed to convince a local kind of VC/incubator called Tech Farm Ventures. And we convinced them to give us a $500,000 bridging loan. And we were going to go out and build a product and figure out what the business was. That was nice. So we thought, well, hold on, we're sending out all of these email alerts telling people about what's happening. Let's just put ads in. How hard can it be? Actually, it's really hard. And again, there's no AdSense, there's no AdWords, there's no ad platform whatsoever. We had to develop all that. Oh, did I say there was no cloud computing either? You've heard that before. You often hear about LAMP stacks. Well, the L for Linux and the A for Apache existed, but the rest didn't back then. So we were like you heard from Jasper this morning from Aconex, you had to basically build your own servers out at Coloco spaces, and quite painful to kind of scale the business. Anyway, we started putting ads into these alerts, and we didn't quite know how to do that. We didn't know how to personalize it, so we just sold, we'll sell 20 different ads every day, and we'll just do a round robin rotation and see what happens. And we were actually able to charge the going rate for CPM back then, but the going rate wasn't that much, unfortunately. But we were starting to get some ad sales, not a whole lot. In fact, I recall the money we earned in that first year was probably just about enough to pay for our holiday party at the end of the year. Not a whole lot more than that, which was at my house, by the way. It wasn't at a fancy restaurant, and I think it was Indian takeaway, if I'm not mistaken. So it's funny the things you remember. Anyway, we were making some money. But our investor wasn't, Tech Farm Ventures wasn't too happy. They said we didn't have a business model. So we thought, okay, surely large companies have a version of this problem of keeping track of content, right? Intranets were just starting to become popular. So I thought, who's got a big intranet? And we started doing our homework, and one such company was Boeing. Boeing at the time had 35,000 employees, had a really, really large intranet. So we spent many meetings with Boeing, but we eventually convinced them to actually purchase a version of Minded. In fact, that was really our first pivot, if I can use that term. We kind of this idea of an enterprise product, which we would essentially customize for a customer's intranet. Which was just as well, because by about May 1996, we were pretty much running out of money on a regular basis, getting pretty close to issuing final paychecks more than once. We got this ultimatum from our investors saying, look, if you guys can't figure out how to actually make some money, why don't you just package up the company for an acquisition? I'm going to come back to this theme because I have to say in retrospect, we didn't have the most patient investors, but we'll revisit that perhaps in the Q&A. So we thought, okay, well, we worked hard, and we were able to actually secure what was a very, very good enterprise deal. I'm still, even now, flabbergasted how big the deal was. It was a $220,000 deal for all 35,000 Boeing licenses plus annual maintenance, which was I remember our list price was $100, so it's a bit of a discount, you know, but still, we were desperate. We took the deal. And they were a great customer, Boeing, and we learned a lot. The trouble with the idea of selling into the enterprise is you need large enterprise customers like Boeing that have large intranets. And there, frankly, weren't that many companies like that back then in 1996, 1997. So we started looking at other types of opportunities. Oh, I should say, though, once we got that deal, all the skepticism like melted away. Suddenly, investors that didn't want to touch us, you know, 2 weeks earlier or 4 weeks earlier were lining up to be part of our Series A. It's amazing what one customer sale from a well-known company can do. So we actually, we closed a $6 million Series A round shortly thereafter off the back of that Boeing deal, and we started hiring engineers as quickly as we could. Tech Farm, as I mentioned, they, apart from investing, they ran an incubator. It was a really awful building in Sunnyvale, and we were the Johnny-come-lately of their portfolio of companies. We had a windowless room in the back of the building off the loading bay. It was just an awful place to work. So we couldn't wait to make enough money to get out of that building. Maybe that was part of the grand plan, you know. I could hear the trucks moving back and forth all day long as they came into the loading bay for one of the other companies that was actually making hardware. And we did follow up on with a few more interesting enterprise deals, and we still very, very early days in terms of revenue, but off the back of the $6 million Series A, we decided we could afford our own space. And we did something a little bit different. We actually, in conventional wisdom would be get everyone in the same building, you know, you want to get everyone together, maximize collaboration, but I was a stick in the mud. I was living, whoa, I've just lost my, here we go. I was living in Santa Cruz, which is a little coastal town, about a 45-minute drive from San Jose in Silicon Valley. And I was tired of commuting. I've been driving back and forth over that road for 8 years. And so I said, no, we're going to have engineering in Santa Cruz. That's where I want it. Matt and Mark, they wanted to have the company in Silicon Valley. So we compromised, and we had an office in Campbell on one side of Santa Cruz Mountains and an office in Santa Cruz on the other side, and we basically had 2 offices right from the beginning. And a lot better than that warehouse, that's for sure. So actually, not having to drive that awful Highway 17 every day was a big part of my motivation for starting a company in the first place. Anyway, the enterprise version of Minded was, how shall I say, a limited success. We'd certainly validated that we could build some interesting technology. We'd certainly validated that it was a useful product for a certain class of companies, but it's fair to say we'd yet to really crack a repeatable business model, in all fairness. And in fact, we were constantly struggling financially, and it looked like we were going to burn through that $6 million pretty quickly. Now, this is late 90s, by the way. This is pre-dot-com crash, so we haven't got to the fun part yet. Anyway, we kept thinking about ways that we could move into adjacent markets. And one idea, I guess you could say our second pivot or adaptation, was we were starting to see online businesses starting to evolve. So the rise of companies like eBay and Amazon were just starting to appear. I know this seems like ancient history to some of you people in the audience, but yeah, these were really new businesses. And we thought, they have the same problem. They need their users to be sticky, and their inventory's changing frequently. They need to have a way to bring people back. So we went to eBay. eBay was close. They were just down the road, and we pitched them this idea of a personal shopper. And what the personal shopper would do, you would go to their website, you would look for an item. If the item wasn't available for sale, we would record that search query, and we would play that back and basically notify you when an item came up for sale subsequently. And they loved it. And they paid us a modest amount of non-recurring engineering to build a custom version. The difference was this time we weren't running on their intranet. It was basically alerts as an application service provider, ASP. Again, the term we used before, we called it software as a service. And we also got a revenue share too, which was kind of nice. So if we brought a customer back to eBay and they then subsequently purchased, we got a share of that. So it was nice. The trouble again was how many eBays are out there? Well, you know, there's eBay, there's Amazon, and after a while you start to, there were a few companies in Japan that were like eBay. We tried selling into those organizations. One company that, which I thought was really interesting was the Washington Post. Washington Post, so online newspaper, actually, interestingly enough, Bezos, the Amazon CEO, now owns it. But they were one of the early websites to kind of really get online. They were building out an online presence, and they realized they needed a way to bring people back to their website. So again, we did another one of these ASP deals to help them bring their readers back to their online website. And I should mention, we went up to Washington State to meet, to pitch to Amazon, who at the time were not even sending out email alerts, let alone, you know, personalized email alerts. And they said, yeah, thank you, but no, we're not interested. And then sometime later, we start to see personalized email alerts coming out of Amazon. Win some, you lose some, I guess. So we kept plugging away. All the while, we were actually growing our Mind It service, and we were slowly but surely growing our revenue from that ad revenue, but it was growing quite slowly. We celebrated in May 1999. Upside magazine, which is a magazine that no longer exists, they listed Netmind as one of the top 100 tech companies, industry startups. That was nice of them, but really, in truth, we still didn't have a viable business model, even then, 3 years in. And one day I remember my chairman coming to me, and this has stuck as truly bizarre, but he said, Alan, you've got to hire more engineers. I said, what are you talking about? They're expensive. It's like, no, you don't get it. The more engineers, the bigger your valuation. It's like, oh, really? So 1999. I think at one point that was described as the Cisco model of valuation, as they'd acquire these little tech companies based on how many engineers they had. So I said, this was a far cry from a few years, only 2 years earlier when he said we didn't have a business model, packaged up the company right away. Anyway, but he was still thinking, I think, deep down the same thing, that you know, it wasn't clear that we had a business model yet. So we were experimenting all the time with lots of different things. In late 1999, we started shopping around for a Series C round. Oh, I skipped the Series B. The Series B was $11 million. So we're now $17 million in. We're getting close to 50 employees, about 30 of them in engineering, working for me. I was head of engineering. Yeah, scary burn. So we started that, we better start thinking about a Series C. It's going to have to be a big one. It's going to have to be like, 25, 30 million or something. Now, right about this time, we did an analysis of our businesses. So we had a fledgling enterprise business, and we were still making the occasional sale. We had a fledgling ASP business, and we were still making the occasional sale. They all had potential, and we had our core ads business running off Mind It. Mind It was now up to about $1 million run rate, off of about 6 million 7-day active users by late 1999. So it wasn't too shabby, but $1 million run rate is not going to sustain a company with 50 employees for very long. So it would have been a nice lifestyle business, don't get me wrong, but we had investors, and those investors wanted a return by hook or by crook. So we started thinking about how we could essentially make our investors happy. I guess the final pivot was really listening to what had been asked of us all along, which is to package up the company for an acquisition. We started that process in late 1999, December 1999, and we were successful in selling the business 3 months later, February 2000, to a company called Puma Technologies, but they subsequently rebranded as IntelliSync, and I actually found an old IntelliSync t-shirt from 2001, and it still fits. Anyway, so it was a nice acquisition. We ended up pleasing our investors quite happily, but I have to be really, really honest, and I feel like an imposter up here in the sense we did not build a repeatable business model. After 4 years of trying, we built great technology, we hired great people, we did do some key deals that validated aspects of the business. We were really good at trying out new things and flexing and pivoting, call it what you will. We did all those things really, really well, but push comes to shove. Was that a sustainable business model? No, it was not. So having said that, I did not want to sell the business. It was Matt and Mark who talked me into selling the business. I was adamant that if we just hung in there, we could grow enough revenue through these other businesses. And perhaps if we had, 5 employees and not 50, we could have done that. We could have, and some of the other entrepreneurs talk about how they've had to kind of scale back at various times in the life of their companies, retrench a little bit so they could survive tough times and then grow in the good times. I think that might have been an option for us, but it would have been a fairly dramatic scaling back because we'd grown so quickly. In fact, we'd grown quickly with the full blessing of our investors and our board. Yes, being the hopeless optimist that I am, I think we could have survived with some serious resizing or downsizing. But in retrospect, we sold at a great time and we made a lot of very, very happy investors. If I look at the other companies, the copycats, so alerts.com, they copied us in '98, then there was changedetection.com, then there was changetech.com. There were literally small battalion of these copies, all of them, every single one of them folded, never made it to any kind of exit, except for us. So we did one thing right, we were first, well, maybe 2 things, and we also decided to go down the acquisition path before it was too late. So we were fortunate. A friend of mine calls that winning the Techno lottery. There is a bit of a, lucky aspect to it. No matter how good your product is, no matter how good your technology, no matter how well you hire, there's still a bit of luck here, let's face it. We did sell at a good time. I will say, though, one other thing that I think we did, apart from the technology, of which I'm still, as you can tell, quite proud of the technology we built and the products we built, but actually I think the other single biggest contributor to our success was the people we hired, and I think we mostly hired really, really well. We were quite thoughtful about our hiring. Again, it's not rocket science. You've heard this from other speakers here today. Hire well, and that will make a world of difference down the track. It's almost 20 years since, next year will be 20 years since I co-founded Netmind. I still routinely catch up when I'm back in Silicon Valley with former colleagues from Netmind, and I still enjoy the catch-ups. It's amazing. So the people you work with, if you do get the culture right and you do hire well, these are people you don't mind spending a good chunk of your life with in years to come. So that really is, in a nutshell, the story of Netmind. I want to leave lots of time for Q&A because this is not an example of a company that figured out its business model and went on to do amazing, sustainable things. This is an example of a company that executed very well in some ways in building technology. We did do some validation and did do some key deals that made us a fundable story, not once, but we had a bridge funding, Series A, we were repeat validators of our technology. But even then, it was not a sustainable business, and hence the exit. So I think I'll open it up for Q&A at this point. Is Bill going to rejoin me? Sure. Yes, he is.
So great, thanks. That was a good story. Let's have a seat. So one of the things I heard, tell me whether this is right or wrong, but you guys essentially created the first alert service because you had a problem of not being able to follow your stock portfolio and other things. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. There's always a problem at the root of, I guess, any entrepreneurial idea, and so I was particularly interested. I was using an online brokerage. Yep. Again, early days. And I was really keen to track the stock prices. But I also had colleagues and friends that wanted to track other information. I remember our marketing group was really, really keen to do competitive analysis of competitors' websites.
Yeah.
They just wanted to know when are they coming out with a new product.
Yeah.
That's relatively easy.
Yeah.
So essentially we were writing scrapers before they were called scrapers, and essentially doing differencing and then presenting the differences. Yeah.
Right, right. But it was really, do you think, is starting with the problem, is that the right place to start?
Well, it worked for, that's a good question. In retrospect, there was a real problem. In fact, I would argue that we still have this problem. We're inundated with information.
Yep.
It's really hard to keep track of relevant information, even today, or especially today on the web. So I do believe starting with a known problem is a good starting point for many, many businesses. There are obviously some companies that, they don't start with something quite that concrete.
Sure.
Maybe they're solving, world peace or something.
Yeah.
But that was certainly the motivation for us. It was a real problem, and we wanted to solve it.
So one of the things that you said, which was pretty fascinating, is that you guys managed to land this big customer, Boeing.
Yeah.
And how big were you at the time in terms of people and?
Tiny.
So how do you go up there? I mean, you like you said, once you landed them, you got this amazing credibility. But how do you sort of land a gigantic enterprise customer when you have no credibility?
Yeah.
What did you do?
Well, okay. We hired our first salesperson, and because we realized 3 engineers, we weren't really good at selling.
Right.
We got better though. Trust me, you get better when you're forced to.
You have to.
Yeah. So I was in all of those deals. The other reason you want to be in those deals is you want to know what the salesperson is saying. If they're promising the moon, you want to be able to deliver on it, right? Salespeople can be dangerous sometimes. So anyway, we were still very, very small. I think what helped with, in fact, I remember that meeting quite distinctly now, because here we are, little old Netmind, and we were in a tech review up at their Boeing in Everett, just outside Seattle, and they were sure they were going to nail us because we couldn't scale to their 35,000 employees. What's this little company going to do? We have 35,000 employees.
Right.
And then I mentioned, we've got 1 million users.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, I think this was my first experience of what we now call the consumerization of IT.
Yeah.
It's where you basically demonstrate a product on the masses, on the internet, and then essentially the internet was our sandbox. And so that gave us some credibility. Now, we weren't the big established organization, but we certainly had strong technical cred.
Right.
And I also think we solved a real painful problem for them. They were desperate to kind of keep track. They had a very, very large intranet. Yeah. And they were desperate to stay on top of it. So we did hit that pain point for them too.
What were they sort of tracking? What changes were they tracking in the intranet?
It's interesting, actually. They were quite sophisticated. It wasn't just team pages and all that. A lot of their supply chain was online inside their intranet. Right. So essentially, it was even part of their internal manufacturing of inventory availability. So we were
pricing.
All of that was getting. They published a lot of this stuff just to the intranet, and so we were basically tracking that for them. Right. They could also point it externally and track competitors and see what Airbus was up to and stuff like that too. It could work both ways.
Yeah. So one of the things you said was you guys never had a sustainable business model.
Yep.
You had
except selling the business.
Except selling the business. That's very good. But you had revenue.
I'm being very clear about that.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's great because obviously you're pointing out the issues that you had, and I think if everybody understands those issues, they can hopefully try to avoid those. But you had revenue sharing, you had advertising, and you had reimbursement for NREs or non-recurring engineering expenses.
And just straightforward per seat enterprise licensing.
Per seat. Okay. So were you purposely searching for something?
Yes.
Or were you just trying to throw anything at the wall? And
we were desperately searching for something.
Right.
We didn't know what was going to work. That's why we tried everything we could think of.
Right. And if you had,
and our investors weren't much help either.
Right.
When you're looking for investors, choose wisely. It's not a criticism. I mean, in the sense that Tech Farm, they gave us the money, for which I'm eternally grateful. If anyone is listening from Tech Farm Ventures. However, in terms of helping us figure out our sustainable business model, they weren't able to help. I'm not saying investors, it's their job to do that either, but they could help.
Right.
Their help was basically, I'll go package it up.
Yeah, so that was another question I had, which was, when you were with your investors, did they start off with you on the journey and then at some point in time depart? Or when did you have this, how far along did your alignment with their alignment stay aligned, if you know what I mean?
Well, we got new investors too, by the way.
Oh, okay,
so,
right.
Went through Series A, Series B, so I don't want to taint all of them. This is again,
Only some of them, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not so much even tainting's a little bit harsh. It's just different perspectives.
Right.
Different investors are going to have look at your businesses differently and bring different value to the table. I think it's fair to say they identified that we solved a problem.
Yep.
We were surrounded with information and we were struggling to keep track of it. And we were to my knowledge, we were the first company to come out with a solution to this. How do I track changing information? So they got that. But they weren't sure how we were going to monetize it. Now, a different investor, I mean, if you think about it, Google didn't know how to monetize search for years.
Yes.
Until we figured out, AdWords.
Right.
That took several years. So it's conceivable that a different investor, dare I say, more patient investor, I don't know, might have given us, the rope, that additional rope. I don't think we didn't ever completely go off the rails. I mean, our investors were always there to see that we were succeeding as best we could.
Yeah.
I mean, so we weren't unaligned, but clearly, they were struggling to help us find that business model, and we were struggling to find it, and so we just kept trying lots and lots of different things.
Let's just go to that one point. You said unaligned, so let's go back to that for a second. So what would you say to somebody who's raising money and thinking about raising a series of rounds where you have, the management team and the founders, and then you've got, investor A and investor B and investor C. What about alignment is sort of important?
Yeah. Okay, first and foremost, that's a great question. First and foremost, I've talked a lot about people and team.
Yep.
So you want to make sure your investors are part of your team. They're an extension of your team. So you want to really, really want to work with those investors as people.
Yes.
And we had good investors. They were very easy to work with. They were supportive. No criticism there whatsoever. Secondly, though, you want to be able to leverage your investors to do things that you cannot do. So if you don't know how to sell, they knew we were 3 engineers. Okay, 1 engineer turned PM, 1 engineer turned marketer, 1 engineer stayed on the true course, the one true path.
Yep.
But we were 3 engineers. That was very evident from day one.
Yep.
And I think in retrospect, perhaps getting a bit more diversity into the team earlier, would have been helpful.
Yep.
We came to realize this eventually when we started to hire salespeople and round out our skills. So, but finding investors who can kind of help plug your gaps. If you're lacking, and whether it's business development skills or selling skills or whatever. So
and sort of being all aligned with you and also with each other.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I would say, in terms of horizons. If your investor wants to make money in 3 years, but you've got some groundbreaking technology that might take 10 years, that's a pretty serious impedance mismatch right there. But we didn't really know because we didn't know what we didn't know.
Right. Sure. So so if you had to do it today, and let's suppose you have you're an entrepreneur, you're starting a company, and you have a choice of investors because you got a hot idea and great demand and all that. How do you actually somebody who's never raised money or has never approached a venture fund, how would you as an entrepreneur sort of check out who to actually take the money from if you had multiple offers?
Yeah. So first, I have to say, I wish that all aspiring entrepreneurs have multiple offers from multiple investors. It's a great situation to be in.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you don't always have that luxury. So sometimes you have to compromise. But in a perfect world, you'd actually be doing almost like a reverse interview of your investors. The interviewers they're interviewing you for team, for product, for business, all of the things that investors are looking for. And you, in turn, are reverse interviewing your investors. Is this an investor that's going to help me go global if I think this is a global opportunity? Or is this an investor that's going to give me the necessary introductions into this particular market or this particular sector? I mean, whatever your criteria. So you really do have to spend the time to do that. again, if you have the situation where you have some choice, then, I would say the investee should do as much homework as the investor in a perfect world.
Yeah. Talk about, one of the things you said was, one of the things you guys did right was you put together a great team that had a really strong, cohesive cultural fit. So talk about cultural fit. What is that? What do you mean by that, and why is that sort of important?
Yeah, so the role of, I guess, the founders or the executive is to really define the vision.
Yep.
We had a big vision. We were basically going to make it easy to keep track of information in this ever-expanding mess of information called the internet.
Yep.
So once you've kind of established that clear vision for the company, we wanted to make sure that everyone was excited about that
Yep.
mission. We were effectively the super productivity tool that was going to make humanity more efficient. I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds somewhat
No,
grandiose.
it's good, it's good.
So we wanted everyone who worked at Netmind to be genuinely excited by that mission. Also, though, we wanted to work with people that we wanted to work with. And this is a completely different dimension.
Yeah.
So buying into the vision. By the way, if you get the vision right, and it's a big vision, it's a lot easier to get excitement from people. If you're just going out to build a better mousetrap, well, if that's not very exciting, why should I drop my really nice, cushy day job to do that? But if you're going to change the world in some way, it's a lot more interesting, and people will join your mission. So, but you still are going to spend an awful lot of time with your colleagues. Too much time,
Yeah.
almost. So you really do want to make sure that fundamentally they're nice people.
Yep.
I mean, you've heard some of the other speakers talk about, humility and humbleness, and I think, by the way, I don't think that's necessarily a skill. I mean, every organization will define the skills or the attributes that are most important for them. We basically wanted to hire people that were thoughtful and respectful of their colleagues.
Right.
Create an environment where you didn't mind spending a good chunk of your
Yeah.
lives, because as entrepreneurs, you will spend a lot of time, building your company and working with probably, many, many days and weeks, more time with your colleagues than at home.
Yeah, so getting that cultural fit is really important.
Yeah.
So let's just go to a couple of questions from the audience. One is, why didn't you just build a site where people could track their stock prices? In other words, a much more vertical kind of an application rather than, does that...
That's a great idea, great question. We built this amazing, broad technology. Maybe we should have. Maybe we could have done that probably with, 2 engineers instead of 30. But okay, I'll take the blame for that. As an engineer, I built a remarkably flexible, general technology which could be applied to lots of different things. So maybe part of our problem as a company was because we had this general technology, we could do lots of different things with it. So we didn't really specialize.
Right. So what's the advantage of going down a deep vertical and specializing versus a broader technology? What would you advise somebody to do in that situation if they had that?
Yeah, I think if you would really have to know that market or that domain really, really well. I didn't really, if one of the founders had been out of the stock brokerage industry and knew something about it. I mean, I was a user, but I didn't. I think perhaps we might have had conversations like this. But I think knowing your domain and knowing that, I think the risk to going very, very vertical prematurely is that, and we saw this with some of the conversations we had with Enterprise Minder, that you essentially give the idea to these customers and they end up building. We did have IP, by the way. We had a small, like half a dozen patents to defend against. But there's only so much you can do as a startup to defend against, protect your IP. So I think the first thing is if you're going to go vertical, then you really, 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 really want to know that vertical really, really well.
Okay. And I think we'll do sort of one more question. How did you deal with sort of the fast followers that came into your market after you created the alert business? What did you do? Did you pay attention to them? Did you ignore them? Did you just do what you were doing? What did you?
We looked at them in the rearview mirror. But we just kept going as fast as we could. We kept innovating. I guess that's probably part of the answer to the previous question about we decided not to go to specialize because we wanted to just keep innovating. So we hired more quickly, we got more money.
Right.
We just went quick.
Yeah.
Which I don't think was a terrible strategy because we had an IPO, an acquisition, and they didn't.
Right.
So we just tried to innovate as quickly as we can. And I think that's a fair strategy. Innovate as quickly as you can. Don't spend too much time looking back at the competitors.
Yeah, so go quick and focus on what you do and do it well.
Yep.
Okay, Alan, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
having me.